Do you think life is simpler as time evolves? For some, it can be more complicated when facing issues about health, estate plans, probate, long-term care, and more. That's why Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell hosts ElderTalk with TuckerAllen, providing intelligent answers for those thinking about their future. Here's Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell.
Welcome to another episode of ElderTalk. With us today is the guest, the single guest that we've had more than any other on this show. I'm sure that's true.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, hands down.
Todd Oetken.
Right.
He's a financial planner. He's based out of Louisville, but he's occasionally even physically come to the studios, and we wish he could do that now, but he's busy, has lots of clients, and he has lots of responsibility in terms of managing funds and other things. So we settle for what we can get, and we can't have him available today for video, so we'll have him in for audio. But anyway, so we thought it's time to have Todd back on to talk about some issues that are pressing in the economy, this issue of inflation, so much discussion of inflation. And it appears that the market is just surging toward new highs every week. How high can it go before there's some sort of major correction? I know these questions are on the minds of our viewers and listeners.
Yeah.
So let's start by addressing those, and then let's come back to a discussion that we come to regularly, or we have before with Todd, and it's worth revisiting, is how do you find somebody to help you do this for you? For people who don't want to manage their own funds, and many people don't, and I understand that because they're not equipped professionally or in terms
they don't have that expertise, right?
Yeah, and time and access to the sort of resources that these research facilities have in major brokerage firms, et cetera. So let's start out then, Todd, and talk a little bit about what your assessment is with discussions about inflation. It's the hottest topic right now.
It really is. And first of all, I want to thank you for having me back on, Joe. I sure enjoy being with you and Jill, and it's just really a pleasure. So thank you so much. And talking about inflation, with the Fed, just the government continue to pour money into the economy. Well, you have more money, prices increase like crazy, and you can kind of witness that if you're trying to build a house today.
Lumber.
Shoot, lumber has been going through the roof. I've had several clients who started building a house back in October, and it's almost doubled the price of the house just because of all the products that they're buying. So it's an issue, and I've had clients who are getting ready to retire, and it's a big concern for them. So what my biggest concern would be, number one, I think you can manage around inflation. I think that, if you don't have a lot of debt, then, you maybe not buy as much gasoline. You might not buy certain products that actually go up, but many of the products are regulated. So it really wouldn't hurt the average person, but it does affect everybody in some way.
Yeah. But what about those who are on fixed incomes? And I don't know what portion of our audience would be, since we assume our audience is over age 65. I know that a good portion of them are on some sort of fixed income, which I suspect will not adjust for inflation.
Right.
And which means that they're concerned how long this will go. The Fed seems to be certain. When I've heard comments from Yellen and even others who appear to be on the inside, they've suggested that they think that this may be transient, that it's just a supply chain issue, and that once the supply chain catches up, that inflation's going to come back down. I know Powell has said that a couple of times, that, this is just temporary, we'll see a pop. And which we definitely are seeing a pop right now.
Right.
But it'll be okay in 2 or 3 months. What's your suspicion? I know you don't have access to inside information, but what's your read on that based on your experience? Do you think this will be transient?
Well, I originally thought that, but here lately, it seems to be way more than 3 or 4 months. I don't see an end to it in the next year or so. But again, that's just an opinion of mine. I have no reason to believe that, except for the fact that I just see what these prices have been doing here lately.
And the supply of money that's being poured into the economy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bad enough that you have the Fed, who before this administration was dumping money and over the last 10 years was dumping money into the economy, directly or indirectly. And now we have joining in the party the Treasury, or in other words, the executive branch. And so now they're spending trillions, and we don't know whether this new proposal, with this infrastructure proposal, which is going to amount to north of $2 trillion, which will put us up to $6 trillion. I just wonder whether the economy can absorb this without creating inflation.
Yeah. Well, we've lived through inflation on several occasions, so it's not something that is going to last forever. And if you're in retirement, it's something where you might have to buckle down a little bit, but in the next 3 or 4 years, it'll kind of level itself out. So I don't see where that's going to be a big issue long term. I just give you an example. When I was in hotel business, we would get a statement every 3 months, and that's how they measured the inflation portion. It would ask you, have you raised prices? And you'd have to mark here or there. But what actually happens is when people have the extra money, you can raise your rates and people still continue to come. But once they get to the point where they can no longer pay that rate, I don't care how good your hotel is or how good your product is, if people refuse to buy it, you got to lower the price. So, and I think that will take effect eventually.
Yeah. And I think Warren Buffett made the comment in his meeting to shareholders a week or so ago that he definitely was seeing prices rising in virtually all sectors, or a broad variety of sectors, and yet he sees that customers are absorbing them, meaning people are, in this case, in other words, in your example, Todd, they hadn't got to the point where they won't pay anymore yet, and it appears that people have enough money, in part through the sources I mentioned a while ago. Apparently they have enough money to where they're willing to keep meeting these higher prices. But as you said, there'll come a point where the consumer will have to say, no, I can't afford it.
Right.
And the other thing that inflates it also is the low interest rate. So, the housing boom is because you can get a 2.75% interest rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage. So, basically, it's all about what the person has, that money they all have in order to spend for the mortgage. It's not about the price of the house. So if the interest rate's lower, they can afford, still $1,400, but the house price is a little bit higher. As interest rates go up, that $1,400, because that's really what they can spend, then the house prices are going to have to come down in order for people to spend the $1,400, which is what most people around that budget for their houses, or a little bit more than that.
Yeah. So I know some of your clients, though, are enjoying new wealth as this market keeps going up and up. They probably all think you're a genius, right? that you.
Well, Todd is a genius.
Yes, in your case. But it is a rising tide that's raising all boats to some extent. Do you think that these two effects will cancel each other?
Yeah. I think eventually everything kind of comes back to the normal. When that happens, I don't know, but you're exactly right. Meeting with, doing these portfolio reviews with clients today is very enjoyable. They certainly have amassed quite a bit of wealth in a very short amount of time. So it's good for people who are retiring, but again, like you said, as it comes back down, then you have to adjust your spending accordingly.
So how many of your clients are on fixed incomes? And I know that most of your clients wouldn't be considered, of course, poor, or even maybe even middle class. I suspect most of your clients have significant assets. But are they starting to have concerns about the ability to generate income in kind of a low-interest environment?
Well, again, we've been kind of pushing more toward a higher percent of stocks, just for the fact that you can't get any return at all in the fixed income portion. That does expose their portfolios to a little more risk than what we would normally do. But if you're only getting 1% on cash and these short-term bonds, it's really hard to justify as an investment. So. But yeah, I mean, it helps the fixed income people if we can have the interest rates increase a little bit, where they can get good return on their investments as far as a bond or even a CD. A lot of older people love CDs still, but right now it really doesn't make a lot of sense to invest in them.
Why is that? I mean, why would anybody invest in a CD?
Well, they're just risk averse. And, some people, if they have enough money and they don't want to take any risk and they can support their lifestyle and very little growth, then, it just makes them sleep better at night. And a lot of times maybe that's all they need is that.
I know some of those
it's
people.
Not a really good investment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my mother, to some extent, fits that profile. And in America, at least, you can still get a positive rate of return on a CD. I mean, in Europe, I assume you have to pay to have a CD. That sounds silly, but it's
Really?
It's negative rates.
Huh.
So, but I thought that was harmless. And I even said to my mother, a year ago, I said, well, Mom, if you're uneasy about what the market's doing, just pull it out and put it on a shelf. I said, we don't have any significant inflation. And so it's harmless. You can draw maybe as much as 1% on a secure investment. But now I'm not comfortable dispensing that advice anymore. And obviously you're not as a professional. It's hard for people to deal with loss of purchasing power in their savings. So they're really going backwards. Even if it's nominally zero, meaning we'll call it 0.5%. It's really not 0.5%, is it, Todd?
No, as prices of medicine goes up and medical expenses go up, gasoline goes up, the utilities now, because we have more of a stringent energy sources, those costs are going to go up. So, that monthly expense that they're going to be paying is going to continue to increase. And if all they're getting is 50 basis points, 0.5% or 1% on their money, they're going to actually lose, quite a bit. And hopefully they will have enough socked away in order to weather the storm. But you really have to have much more return than that. Yeah.
It's just you're going backwards if you think that you have it safely placed on a shelf. And that's one of the bad things about inflation is all those rules of thumb that we've had historically where we think placing money where it can't lose its value is a conservative, safe thing to do. But in an inflationary environment, it's a bad thing to do. There's worse things to do, but still, you want to choose an option where at least you don't go backwards.
Yeah.
And I don't want to dwell too long on this subject, Todd, but I read an article in the Wall Street Journal just in the last couple of days where it talked about food prices. Food prices, like they gave an example of apples and other things in a grocery store. The prices of staples in grocery stores are headed up. And I mean like 10 apples, I think, some types of apples were going up in this article. It mentioned 10 to 20%. So I'm not saying it's 10 to 20% across the board with food, but I am saying that many grocery items are going to be definitely up in high single digits in the short term. Again, that's what we're talking about is how long this will last. And restaurants are increasing their prices.
Yeah.
They're just being very forthright about it. They're saying, look, we've got to do this. Our labor costs are going through the ceiling. McDonald's is paying $50 to get somebody to come in for an interview.
Yeah.
That's hard to believe.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I know that's such a challenge, even in our business, in the hotel business, which is paying people to stay home is not working very well for the service industries at all. And we're slowly starting to get new business, and now it's a tough trying to find those employees who can service the new business. And so again, like you just said, we're having to offer more monies in order for them to come in, and I don't know at what level do you finally entice it. In this paying this $300 extra per week in unemployment benefits is really enticing people to really stay home because it benefits. They really make more money by staying home and collecting the unemployment than it does in order to go to work. So that is a challenge. And hopefully we'll work through that here in the next 6 months as that starts slowing up and they discontinue that benefit.
I know the McDonald's by our house in Wentzville, they've had troubles with staffing, and there have been several days where they just had to shut down and they had a sign, we don't have enough staff to work today. I mean, who would have thought?
Who would have thought? Yeah.
I know, Jill, and that's all over the country. We've had that here also. And, the challenge is going to be, so you have to increase the wage today to get them, but then as things start settling down, you can't really tell people, hey, we're not going to pay you that anymore. So it is those level of service pay is going to have to stay the same, which means the products are going to have to cost more.
Yeah,
forward.
yeah. I mean, when your highest cost is labor, and you know that labor seems to be uninterested, or you're trying to woo them into a workplace when the alternative, as you said, is to stay home and be paid, then food's going to go up.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got to increase the prices. And the interesting thing about it is people get that. I mean, at this stage, as Warren Buffett's pointing out, there's not a lot of complaint about prices. People are digging into their pockets and paying these higher costs for restaurants and whatnot when they go out. So far, there's not this big complaint. But remember, a lot of this money that's floating around right now is recent stimulus.
Yeah.
Is PPP money or other money that's been placed out there. So what's going to happen when it's no longer, the federal check that's available and people are having to reach into sacred savings?
Yeah.
So I think
there'll be an adjustment.
I think there will be. So what do you think about TIPS? I think it's called, these Treasury protected Treasury options.
Inflation protection.
Yeah,
Treasury inflation.
Yeah, explain that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that much about them. We sold them back in the 80s and the 90s, but ever since then, I never saw where they were value. And supposedly, you put in that amount of money, whatever the might be $1,000 usually is what the certificate price is, and then they're supposedly supposed to stay up with inflation. So those would definitely be more marketable today if you anticipate inflation coming. But I don't have that much information on them. I haven't sold them so long.
Yeah, and I've heard them come up recently as an option, or at least I know they're selling more than they have in years. And TIPS is an acronym, and I think it's as you were suggesting, Treasury inflation protected securities, and it's an acronym. It's called TIPS. And so you buy them in $1,000 increments, and they adjust for inflation, your rate of return. But they define inflation in a very conservative way. I think it's the Consumer Price Index, which we know has long failed to reflect what were definitely higher prices, but it wasn't in that basket of goods that's captured by the Consumer Price Index, which excludes, among other things, real estate appreciation. So I think that I just throw that out there because I think some people now are looking for something that is identified as an alternative. What do you think about Bitcoin? What do you think about cryptocurrencies?
Yeah. Well, actually, Jill and I were talking about that earlier, and I have done some research on it. I don't understand it. I don't understand. It seems to me just a supply and demand kind of thing right now. As long as there's more people wanting to buy than there is to sell, then it's going to continue to go up. But I don't see the end result where it actually provides value. The idea is it is going to be a fiat. It's going to be a currency,
right?
An international currency that isn't regulated by anybody. So I guess, Bitcoin is the top of the line. It's the one that most people recognize, and it has the biggest market share. Bitcoin, is being accepted at several different places today where it used to not be. And these other coins is Ether, and then the Doge coin, I think, is the one just came out.
Yeah, Doge,
Doge coin, right. So, I don't see the challenge, and I don't know enough about it to be an expert here, but the challenge I see is I can't see governments allowing them to take and be the primary currency in the world, because so many governments use their currencies in order to help their economies, as far as exports and imports. And they either value, put money in to devalue it, or take money out to increase the value of their currency. So I can't see where most of these countries could give up that luxury, but I don't know. It's certainly here lately has been in the news, and they're going crazy. So I would like for somebody to explain me what the end result is and how it becomes profitable to people who actually own it.
And Todd, isn't it more attracting younger people? We're not talking about older people, senior citizens.
Yeah, I believe the young group are the ones getting out online, the Robin Hood or whatever the name of the different discount brokerages, and they're buying in. And then I think it's just like going to the track right now. Again, some of them have been in a long time. These aren't new. They've been around about 10 years, but they really have taken the spotlight these last 2 to 3 years. So I think the people who have been around a long time with it understand it, and they understand what the end result is supposed to be. I'm struggling to figure out what that is.
Yeah. I think our younger generation, they're more risk takers.
Yeah, but they've seen less of the world too. So
for sure.
I don't think we should impute too much, maybe as much smarts to youth as we tend to. They're clever and they're knowledgeable, but they lack wisdom.
Very true.
And those of us who've been around the block for a while, some of us have been around the block more than others over time. But the point is, I don't know that they appreciate how quickly something can go from star to has been,
right.
and particularly in the investment field. And I'm like you. I'm very suspicious of the whole crypto thing. I wouldn't bet on it. And I think it will be transient, but time will tell.
Yeah, the other thing, Joe, which scares me to death is there's no regulation, and they can, if you lose your account numbers, you lose it. It's anonymous. You can't call a hotline and say, "Hey, I need you to help me to get in my account." It doesn't work that way. So that would be a challenge.
Yeah, it is scary because they keep emphasizing that it's decentralized. There is no central place
right.
where there's an authority that's running things. It's distributed over thousands of computers across the planet, and some would say that's what protects the numbers. No individual, no government can even go in and shut down or change those records.
It really does sound like something from a science fiction movie.
Yeah. It's based on this blockchain technology, which does have a lot of utility in some areas, but maybe not this. So I take it then you don't have a lot of your clients' retirement portfolio and Dogecoin.
Yeah, we're not even allowed to trade it in our company, and I would definitely encourage everybody not put any money in there. If you can't afford to lose it, you should not be in that investment until it becomes a little clearer what the actual end result is supposed to be. But I did notice on 2020's tax return, there's a question from the IRS: do you own any cryptocurrency? So they're starting to figure out that some way or other they want to get their piece of it. And
really,
so far, I don't think they're getting their fair share. Yeah.
They that's going to be more and more a topic of conversation, and that may be the particular straw that breaks this camel's back is the idea that you don't escape all the tax consequences of every transaction. And unlike money, there's a gain or a loss in the change in value. We could talk about that later. But so I want to, while we have you on here, I want to kind of get to some of those most basic questions that a lot of our listeners have. Many are wondering right now, should they be placing their money in something like an ETF, or should it be in a mutual fund? And some don't understand the difference. And can you give some basic advice to listeners that are over 65 and they may not have a fortune, but they do have liquid funds that they accumulated over a lifetime, probably more in 401ks and IRAs than anything else. And they watch them go up, but they still, I suspect, are confused in this unprecedented environment. I mean, the last year, well, there's probably a precedent, but we have to go back a long way to find what we've seen the last year. So what would be your advice to these? You probably have these people coming in your office every day.
Yeah. So here's what I would say. Number one, all financial advisors and brokers or salespeople, insurance people, they all have their own way of doing investing and planning for people. And all of them could be right. I mean, there's some dishonest ones out there, but not very many. And most people have their own way of doing it. It doesn't mean their way is any right or wrong from somebody else. So it's important that when you're actually picking a financial planner or a financial advisor, that person has to have the same ideas that you do as far as how you want your money managed and how at risk you want to be. So I think it's really important to interview several different people and see if they meet what your expectations are going to be. A good thing to start with is see if they have any credentials. You know, if they have a certified financial planning designation, that's one of the top industries designations, saying, hey, this guy's gone above and beyond to learn what he needs to know in order to be effective in handling your money. So I think it's important to start there. And then once you get that, then you come up with an investment policy statement. And it tells you that, hey, we're going to manage your money like this, and this is the kind of the results that we expect, and this is the amount of risk we're taking. And once you have that, then you really know where you're going.
So you're a CFP, a certified financial planner.
I am.
Right. So how does somebody distinguish between that, though, and a stockbroker? And I know that many people think if they pick up the phone and call, I won't name any nationally known brokerage firm, and get somebody on the phone, or maybe they were referred to somebody from a member in their church or synagogue, I think that they're going to assume that that person is trained as a financial advisor. Can you speak to that?
I can, because when I first started in the business 20 some odd years ago, they sent me to New York and they started training me, and all they were trying to tell me to do is sell this product. They weren't giving me any reason why to sell that product, but I think it just because it probably made the company the most money. And when I came back from training, I thought, you know what? I've been around too long, and I have such a good reputation. I'm not going to risk my reputation on selling this product just because this company told me to. And that's actually when I went back to school and started studying for the CFP, which teaches you a little bit about all areas, from insurance to estate planning to investments. And so you have a more of a well-rounded look at what people actually need. And by doing that, when someone comes in, they have this pot of money, you're looking at, hey, are you tax sensitive? Who's going to inherit it? And so it changes sometimes how you're going to actually invest it, as opposed to just saying, we're going to put you in this mutual fund, this ETF, and it'll do fine. But really, in the long run, if you manage it where, hey, you're doing this for the long haul, there's different ways you would do those. But again, everybody has their own opinions, and there's nobody can say one way is right, one way is wrong. It just depends on the client and what they feel comfortable with.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. I mean, you have to tailor to each client's lifestyle.
Every single one is an individual to us, and their portfolios would look that way.
And Todd, I want to ask you something. I read about this study from Northwestern Mutual, and it said that only about 29% of Americans use a financial advisor. I find that incredibly low. Do you agree with that?
Now, is that 29% of all financial classes? That must mean...
It said 29% of Americans. That's what this said. And I'm just a little confused by that. That seems incredibly low.
It does. And I'm wondering, Todd, that must mean a percent among people who have assets to spend, say middle class and above, because there's no way that it can be much higher than that, even among people who have assets, much less if you spread it over the whole population. Are you familiar with those statistics?
I'm not, but it makes sense, because really when you look at the average savings of Americans, it is really not that great. Many people don't invest in their 401k plans, and they do kind of live by this, hey, it's important to me to do something right now, and they forget that, hey, if they start saving when they're in their 20s, when they're in 60, they're going to have some money there. So I think when you look at the percentage of people who actually have amassed a significant amount of money in retirement, it in the United States, it is very, relatively low. But I do think that the older population, if you would consider that, I think they're more apt to have a financial advisor, and I think the younger population are more apt to have these robo-advisors are going online because they feel more comfortable just going online, running
Right.
a quick computer model and saying, hey, invest this and this.
Yeah. I don't think they're as dependent on that human touch,
No.
is my read.
No,
But
I agree.
But I wanted to clarify this because people can easily get confused. When you read an article like that and say a financial advisor, was that the phrase that was used?
Yes.
I'm wondering how they're using that word because as you just explained, there are brokers, meaning people whose job it is to conduct transactions, to sell products.
Right.
And they get paid the
Right.
more transactions you do, the more they get paid. So, and particular products, they're paid more for those products than they are other products. So there are lots of conflicts of interest when you have simply a stockbroker or somebody whose job is to buy and sell securities for you.
Right.
Now, they often call themselves financial advisors, and I don't think there's any ethical rule. For example, there's a rule about whether you can call yourself an attorney. I mean, they're very strict rules. Whether you can call yourself I started to say doctor. I don't know if there's a rule on that. I think there is a rule on physician. I think that name is owned, meaning it's got to be somebody who has an MD or a few other things might be permitted. But the phrase financial advisor is just real murky and it's very permissive legally as to who can use that. So a whole lot of people use the phrase financial advisor, some with no training, some who are simply stockbrokers, and I don't mean that to put them down. They still have to go through training, like they get, a Series 7 test. That
66, right.
Yeah, which is a tough test. I mean, it has a lot. It's not like being a certified financial planner. I mean, it's a few tests that you take, and they're not easy. You have to know how the stock market works. You have to understand securities, common stock, preferred stock. You have to understand those things. But becoming a financial advisor, as I think most of us would use that phrase, that's really a certified financial planner. And that's somebody who has, as we talked on here before, it's a multi-day test. It's a lot of training around a lot of subjects. You have to understand insurance, how that works, in order for you to be able to advise your clients. What kind of insurance should you have? Should you have term? Should you have permanent? You have to know about stocks. You have to know about risk management, which is kind of related to insurance.
Yeah.
You know about retirement rules, and that's incredibly complicated. To know the rules relating to qualifying for retirement and how's a 401k meet the rules of ERISA. So there's lots of stuff to learn that a financial planner has to know because it's a pretty wide circle of interest that affect the finances of the typical household. It's not just stock market investments.
No, not at all.
It's lots of things, real estate. So I don't think that many people, when they think they're going to somebody who they're calling a financial advisor, I don't think they realize that that's somebody who probably isn't trained more than to tell them whether to buy or sell stocks. And then on top of that, there's the question of their incentives. And I don't want to be hard. It sounds like I'm hard on stockbrokers, but they do earn their money. They know a lot of things. That's the typical person you're going to talk to. If you call a major brokerage house, you're probably talking to a stockbroker, which means that it's somebody who is paid for transactions based on what you buy and sell. Is that fair to what I just said?
It is very fair. The other thing that comes into play is, are you a fiduciary or are you not a fiduciary? So a stockbroker has to make a suitable recommendation to a client. Just means at that time it was suitable for them. A fiduciary, as a CFP, they have to make what's in the client's best interest, which means if you're making a recommendation, if there are two different strategies would perform equally well, you would take the cheapest strategy for that person. A stockbroker can choose the highest payout because it was suitable for that client. Not that they do that, but that's the difference between the fiduciary responsibility and just having a suitable relationship with the client.
So I know that you have a hard stop coming up. So why don't we conclude with wrapping up on this particular topic? How do people pick a certified financial planner? And I know you're in Louisville. So you are available to serve clients in other cities, of course. But I know that you're not on here to market your services particularly. So how would somebody find a good certified financial planner, and how can they expect to be charged by them?
So if you would go to cfp.org, and that's the Certified Financial Planning website, they have an app on there where you can put in where you live and what's important to you, and it'll kind of draw up how many CFPs are in your area, and you can give them a call. Most CFPs will charge a fee, and it's based on the amount of assets you invest with them. So there's no charge for buying or selling, bringing your money over. And so you're really on the same side of the table as the client, because if the market goes up, you make a little more money. If the market goes down, you don't make as much money. And that's kind of the difference.
Okay. And so often it's based on a percent of the funds that are invested.
That's correct.
And now, might they also, though, be charged on an hourly basis?
Yes, some
to develop a financial plan.
Exactly. They'll do an hourly basis, or they'll say, "Hey, we're going to do this plan. It'll cost this amount of money." And then the investment portion, they wouldn't make any money on those. The person could invest their own money if they wanted to do that.
Okay. Very helpful.
Always a pleasure, Todd.
Yep, Todd.
Always, for sure.
I know that we had to work within a strict guidelines here in terms of the time. Maybe we can circle back and get some video. So,
okay.
In any case, we appreciate you being on in whatever form you're available.
Thank you. I'll do better next time, I promise. I got to figure this out.
Hey, thank you, Todd. Take care.
All right, Joe. It's good talking to you. Bye-bye. Yeah,
take care. So, one thing I wanted to circle back on is talk about a couple things real quick before we wrap up. On taxing this whole cryptocurrency thing, I don't think that many people who are pursuing cryptocurrencies know that it's treated just like a security or a stock. Mm-hmm. So currency, for example, if you buy and sell currencies, now if your gains or losses, then yeah, you might have to pay taxes on that. But for the most part, we don't think of a currency as something that you pay taxes on to use. But any time that you use any form of cryptocurrency, this is what the tax laws are going to be going forward. Anytime you use a cryptocurrency, then you've had a gain or loss. Unless you use it for the precise value that you bought it, which we know that's not going to happen.
Right.
So it's going to be a gain or loss. So think about this. If you decide that you have a cryptocurrency and you want to make a purchase, but maybe you're purchasing a Tesla. So if you purchase a Tesla with this cryptocurrency, you've had, in addition to that transaction, you've had a gain or loss. So if the value of the car is $100,000,
okay,
and let's assume that you paid for that coin or those coins, let's assume that your total cost for those coins is $80,000. So you've traded what you think is $100,000. You've traded your coins for the car, and it appears to be kind of like barter, right? That you don't.
Right.
There wouldn't be taxes on that transaction, you would think, because you've not engaged in investment. You're simply holding currency, right? Digital currency. Well, actually, you did engage in investment. So that's one of the things that I don't think people are appreciating yet. And what's more complicated than that, you have to figure out when you bought those coins in order to know what your gain was. Because in my example, if you paid $80,000 for those coins and now you buy a $100,000 car with it, you've made a $20,000 taxable gain on your use of the coins. But what if you bought the coins over a period of time at different prices? And that's true for most people who buy these coins. You buy one this week, you buy one or a fraction of one next week, you buy another one next week. Well, you've got to figure out which coin you used on that particular occasion in order to calculate your gain or loss.
Oh, my goodness. That sounds way too complicated.
I know, but that is the way crypto is going to be dealt with. And I don't think now people have just been buying it and holding it, but they've all been saying, no, this is going to be the future currency of the world. So they're all saying that. And now a few of them are starting to actually engage in transactions to buy something. Up to now, people just been holding it and saying, yeah, this is my currency of the future.
Right.
But now that they're going out And a few places like Tesla are saying, yeah, you can use your coin with us. Well, it's really like owning shares of Apple stock and trading Apple stock for it. If I use that example, everybody gets it. Oh, well, of course, if I traded Apple stock for this car and I made money, meaning I bought the stock low and its trade-in value for this car was I made a lot of money, then we all get it. You pay taxes on what's the equivalent of a sale of the Apple stock. Well, that's exactly what's happening with this currency. That's just one of many problems with digital currency, with cryptocurrencies, and I really think that this is going to end in a bust.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere near it. There's too many unknowns about it.
There are lots of unknowns, and there's no real history. I mean, I'm not saying this is really like the tulip bulb bubble, in Amsterdam centuries ago. I'm not saying it'll quite blow up that way, but I just think that very soon we're going to realize that this was not a good idea for a currency.
Yeah.
It fluctuates in value. It's definitely subject to control, meaning even though no government can shut it down in that sense, they can clearly shut down your participation by criminalizing it. And will a few people go ahead and use it if it's criminalized? Yeah, these people in these dark corners of the planet who engage in other stuff that's equally questionable, but they'll continue.
Do you think that could happen, though?
Oh, I think that I think that if it threatens the control of currencies, then yeah, I certainly think that can happen and will happen. One other thing I wanted to talk about on the issue of inflation, and I'll close with this, and I know that I may wear this topic out with people, so I don't want to spend too much time on the topic, but I do think it's one of the most important questions that's facing the economy now are issues relating to inflation. But also by the argument that it may be transient. So here's the argument, a little fuller than what we said a few minutes ago. I didn't want to take up Todd's time talking about this because I wanted his opinion on other stuff. But those who feel that this is transient, here's their explanation. They say, well, wait, if you go back to the outset of the coronavirus crisis, there was a period early on, just as we realized that we had a world pandemic,
right?
Once we realized that, then immediately there was this impact on the market. Stocks went down, and guess what? Prices went down on goods. So houses, just very briefly, were less expensive. They went up very soon thereafter in like May. But everything went down for a little while. And so what happened was suddenly there was this supply, this inventory of stuff. Food, building materials, everything you can imagine, across all sectors pretty much, there was this existing supply of stuff that was there. And all of a sudden, it looks like the economy has just come to a complete halt in the face of this thing that we knew nothing about.
All the uncertainty.
Yeah, but we knew was going to shut down the world, perhaps to some extent. So all of a sudden, we had an oversupply. In other words, there was this time when suddenly all the demand stops. So we have this supply sitting here in the U.S., for example. So what do? Well, we lower prices. So prices initially went down because there was this oversupply at the outset of the crisis. So that kind of makes sense. So now what's happened is suddenly we've realized, oh, we're coming back to normal.
Right.
And the supply chains were not ready for that either. So it's the opposite. So now what's happening is all of a sudden we're rushing out of our houses, we're running into restaurants, running into stores, running into dealer showrooms, and we're trying to buy these things. And all of a sudden the supply chains that we shut down last year, thinking that the world was coming to an end, can't catch up. So that whenever you hear Yellen and you hear Powell and others who are saying that these experts who are saying that they think that inflation is going to be transient, that's what they're saying. They're saying that just like happened on the front end of this when prices went down briefly, now we're seeing the opposite. All we have to do is let the supply chains to catch up. And when they catch up to this sudden demand, when we're standing in showrooms saying, give me a car, and they're saying, well, I don't have any coming in for a while because I didn't think you were going to be here.
And not to mention the computer chip shortage.
Yeah, and so many other things. And the computer chip shortage is affecting a lot of industries, including the car industry. So So that's the analysis, is that as soon as we get the supply chains up and running, which they will be, the belief is that we don't really lack enough lumber, or at least enough trees. We don't really lack enough capability to create these chips. Maybe we upgrade some of the factories, the assembly lines. True, they're having to change the manufacturing process. So those things you don't change overnight. But the point is, you can change them pretty fast. You can change them in months, not years. We're talking months.
It's fixable.
It's very fixable. That's the theory. So it means that as soon as that's done, then all these prices that we're being hit with suddenly, this big jolt, which I would suspect over the next month or so, we're going to see go up to maybe 7%, I'm guessing. Yeah. And I think that Powell and others in power, so to speak, are saying, don't worry about it. Don't panic. It's going to come back down very quickly because we do have these goods to fill these orders. It's not that we don't have them. It's that we have to we have to quickly make up for the fact that these have been shut down for a year.
Right.
So that's the argument. I tend to be very skeptical. I tend to think that it's attributable to this flood of money that's just gushing down the streets of America.
Oh, yes.
It was just gushing down the streets of Wall Street. Now it's gushing down Main Street. And when that happens, that's when you see inflation. You notice we didn't see inflation when money for the last 10 years was just roaring down the streets of the financial capitals, the financial capitals of the world. That didn't produce inflation. Well, it produced inflation in stock prices, but not in goods and services. And now suddenly it's spilled over. It's broken, those barriers, and now we're seeing it everywhere in America. And the question is this just a transient phenomenon? And I tend to think it's not just transient. I don't think it's going to be double-digit inflation, but I think it's going to be around longer than the experts believe. But what do I know? I mean,
time will tell.
I'm not an authority as Powell and Yellen are, so I could be completely wrong. At least you know their argument and their theory, and I agree. It sounds good.
Right.
But we've never issued this much money into the economy before. Even as a percentage of the GDP, we've never issued this much money.
It's unheard of.
So to think that we can do it without enduring unfavorable consequences just seems naive to me. We're thinking ourselves masters of the universe. And I think we might get humbled soon.
I think that's a good way to put it.
In any case, another episode. We look forward to your joining us again. This has been Elder Talk. Take care.
You've been listening to Elder Talk with TuckerAllen, providing intelligent answers for those thinking about their future, with Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell. Sponsored by TuckerAllen, your estate and elder law advisors. For more information, visit TuckerAllen.com. Listen again next Saturday for another edition of Elder Talk with TuckerAllen. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements.